Jenkins from UCL, who will lead the first part. Can you share your screen, Clodagh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. As Demetra said, my name is Clodagh Jenkins. I'm a Principal Teaching Fellow at UCL. What I'm going to focus on is the sort of big picture bit, the stepping back and thinking about how in the world you're going to redesign your course for next year, possibly even already not knowing what next year is going to look like in your institution, and thinking about things like what's the best way for your students to connect with you, with each other, how are they going to reach the learning outcomes if they're in an online format, and particularly if they're in online some of the time, but not all of the time. So many of you will have responded to the survey that we ran on the website last week. And 51% of the survey respondents said that this issue of how to redesign their course was one of the things they were looking for most help with, so they gave it a 4 or 5. And I'm not really surprised by that, because actually it's quite difficult. It takes a lot of time to reconceptualize what and how you teach. Part of me thinks actually it might be easier if you were starting a new course rather than changing one that you already have. So thinking about what you want to do and then actually implementing that plan takes time and quite a lot of brain power. So, but for me, planning really is the top priority. I know there's loads of discussions going on in all our institutions about the technology and what's the best technology to use. But I actually think you need to think about the design first, although there's obviously sort of a chicken and egg here, because you need to know something about the tech to think about how you're going to design it. So what I'm going to do is walk you through where I've got to with one topic in the economics of regulation module that I'm going to be teaching next term. As of last week, UCL has announced that we're going to have online lectures, so I have some clarity there for term 1. We don't know yet what we're doing with small group teaching, so that's still a question mark for me. So what I'm doing is planning on the assumption that there will be at least some students online in term 1. I'm also trying to make sure that what I do is usable for the future, and this is really important to me, but also something that I think is going to be really important for convincing colleagues to put effort into this. So they're not going to want to put the effort in if they think it's a big sunk cost that's just going to get thrown away for the following academic year. So you'll see in the guide that Parama, who'll be talking later, and I prepared, that it's really about creating something adaptable that you can keep using in the future as well. That's something that I think is very important. So when I've been thinking about this topic in my course, I've made use of the guide, including the planning template at the end, and I've also made use of these principles, which you can see on the screen. I was really pleased to see that in Mike's video about the student learning journey, that what I'm thinking about is very consistent with that. He's obviously been doing his thinking for a long time as well. These principles, and in fact the whole guide that we created, are really based on our own experience of teaching over the last, well, in my case, 8 years. Parama has a much longer history of teaching than me, but also knowledge of the literature, but maybe even more importantly, just getting loads and loads of ideas from peers on Twitter. So if you follow the Econ Teach hashtag, there is just so much stuff going on there about how to adapt your courses. But I think Pram has already mentioned this in the chat, but this is version 1 of our guide. So if anybody has any suggestions of other things to include, please let us know. So what I'm going to do is share with you the Moodle page I'm using for my regulation module, and hopefully this will work. Maybe I need to close this. This is all good experience for people teaching on Zoom. Okay, so in UCL we use Moodle. This is actually my old Moodle course, but I put it into the student view. What it used to be was a section on lectures, a section on tutorials, a section on homework, things like that. What we're now being recommended to do is a topic by topic collapsible approach. So this is UCL have set up a new Moodle template for us to use for what they're calling connected learning. So what I wanted to talk about was, I'm not sure why I started with the last topic, but the one that I've been working on is rail privatisation in Great Britain, possibly because it's one of the most topical ones, the easiest ones to do. So the first principle that we had in our guide, and that I think is really important, I've already kind of talked about, is make sure you invest the time upfront to plan the redesign of your course. I was really initially quite frustrated at the fact that I was going to have to redesign this course, because over the last 8 years, I've kept tweaking it and tweaking it and tweaking it. And last year, I really thought, right, I've nailed it. I can repeat it now. And then here we are. But we are where we are, and I'm going to have to make the changes. Fortunately, this course already had all term time assessments. So I actually, unlike most of my colleagues, have some time at the moment. So I've been trying to think about how to redesign the topic, but in a world where I'm getting rapidly changing guidance from my institution. So a lot of us are in this situation where we need to get going now with making the changes, but we're not quite sure what we can and cannot do. I've decided to plow ahead. We are getting increasingly more clarity, which is helpful. The thing I wanted to emphasize was that I've only done one topic, I'm not finished yet, and I've already spent 3 days on it. Now, I am a bit of a perfectionist, I'm not going to pretend I'm not, but this is partly learning Moodle from a different angle, using things I haven't used before, but most of it's been around the planning and the thinking about how to do it. I do think, you know, the other topics will probably be a bit quicker, but I still think you should expect to be spending quite a long time planning and implementing your changes as you go in mind. And it is worth bearing in mind, I'm already at the sort of innovative end of teaching, if that makes sense. So I'd already part flipped, I already had term time assessments. So for some people, there may be a bit more thinking to do. The second principle that we have is to use a mix of synchronous and asynchronous, and probably leaning more time towards asynchronous, or stuff that students can do in their own time. So what I've done with this topic is put in a label to say what they would do before a live session, a label for the live sessions, and then material to review after the live session. So making it as structured as possible for the students. Our live sessions, we're going to run on Blackboard Collaborate. Again, that's what UCL is supporting for us. We haven't yet had guidance on what to do for tutorials, so I've had to just put in a holding place for myself. It may be on Teams, or it may be, we may be allowed to do it through Zoom, or setting up groups in Blackboard Collaborate. But the main thing here is to make it clear to the students, here's the stuff that you need to do by yourself before the live session. This is what we're going to do in the live session, and this is what you should do afterwards. I do think that structure and that guidance is going to be really key for them. So our third principle relates. It's about making sure that where you provide these materials, you make sure that they're short and they're interactive. So for the live session, I've made my traditional 2-hour lecture 1 hour, expecting it probably to only really be about 45 minutes. I'm hoping I'll still be able to do it weekly, because I would like that human contact. But I'm not going to do a lecture where I stand at the front and present material as I'm doing now. It's all going to be about opportunity for questions and discussion in breakout rooms amongst the students. For the asynchronous materials, I've done a mix of things. So I found some data, some videos. I am planning on recording myself presenting the more technical parts. So using my old lecture slides, but doing voiceover PowerPoints, but breaking it up into little bits. So, you know, a 5-minute video on the Vickers and Yarrow's privatization model, a 5-minute video on empirical evidence on privatization, really breaking it up into lots of chunks, but using the materials I already had. I also basically have written a textbook for this course, but I'm going to break the chapters up and put a chapter into each week rather than having it as one big long document. But what's nice, and this is the real opportunity of being online, is you can, so this is a very applied policy course, so you can really put up-to-date stuff in here. So I've done some things like in Pearl Trees, which I've never used before. I've put in links to the regulators' websites so students can go in to see press releases and stuff. In Pinterest, or Pinterest as my children tell me it's called, I put in some pictures of congestion because we're going to talk a lot about what are the problems with ownership in the railways. And I will be sending students an email to add their own images in here of things that they can do. So much more visual, much more current than what I used to do in the past. I've also got a discussion forum where I've asked the students to explain who owns the railway in their country. And that's something that the feedback I've always had on this course has been, you're very focused on Ireland and Great Britain. And that's because that's what I know. So now I'm going to be able to take advantage of the fact that there's a platform to that for them to tell me what they know. I was just playing around in my old course page thinking the students are done, they're all assessed, but some of them have started telling me what's going on around the world already, which is quite nice. So that's going to be really useful to get information from them. And then I've also put a quiz on. So before the live session, when they finish their asynchronous material, there's a quiz in Kahoot, which won't be quite as easy as this quiz that you can see here. I've never used Kahoot before, which is why I tried it. I think it's a bit childish. So I'm looking forward to getting some other ideas on polling over the rest of this session, but I'm sure there's more research to be done. So that's the short and interactive materials. In the live session, there's also going to be polling, discussion sessions. And then afterwards, what they have to do is a wiki where they're asked to give their own views on the benefits and downsides of government ownership, providing evidence. So the expectation is they take everything that they've read, everything that they've thought about, and put in their own ideas into this wiki. I still need to think about how I make them do this because it doesn't count for credit. And there's also homework to submit, which are 2 short answer questions. But I'm going to experiment with doing this through the group peer review activity on Moodle so that they peer review each other's work. Again, it doesn't count for credit. And I think this will really help them understand the marking criteria if they're doing the peer review. So that's a third principle about making things short, interactive. The fourth principle is about making things engaging and accessible. So engaging, you can see it here, Moodle is not the most engaging interface in the world. My 15-year-old just looks at it and goes dull, dull, dull. But you can do things like embed the videos, embed the pictures to liven it up a little bit. But the engaging, I guess, has to come more from the design of the activities as much as possible. Accessibility is obviously really important. There's not much we can do about whether or not somebody has a good internet connection, but you can certainly make sure that it's accessible in terms of, if they've got some but poor internet accessibility, they can download stuff on low speeds and things like that. Using a different mix of media so that people with different issues can use some of the materials and not others. Our Moodle new template apparently has been checked for accessibility, so we've been given some confidence that the way it's set up and stuff meets accessibility rules. Also things like knowing that YouTube has transcripts for videos. So and I think we discovered from Mike's video that the Piazza video also provides a transcript when you record a video there. The other way to make things engaging is, of course, to keep them current. So I've got my Twitter feed on here, which someday will actually have something about regulation rather than teaching online on it. But the idea is that we hashtag the course and students can follow that. So I do think if you want your students to keep learning online, you know what it's like yourself. It can get dreary reading stuff, so making it as mixed up as possible. Fifth principle is don't depend on having one exam at the end of the year / mix up your assessments during the term. Now, there's lots of good pedagogy reasons for this. many of you know that I come with a very big employability hat on most of the time, and for skill development, closed book exams are not the best thing to do. But even if you firmly believe that closed book exams are the best thing to do, we know from this year that our resilience to shocks at the time of those closed book exams is just
Can someone bring my phone as well, please? My phone?
You might want to mute yourself. Thank you. I already had term time assessment. So where's my assessment block? It's here. So I'm quite fortunate here. So I've always had in-class quizzes, a take-home essay, which is individual, and a group research project. The challenges for me are going to be these quizzes used to be in a tutorial with invigilation, and now I need to move them online. They're short answer quizzes, not MCQs. So I'm going to have to think about the design of them. Take-home essay can probably be reasonably the same. It's always been online, an open book. And the group research project, I want to do the same, but need to think about how they're going to collaborate with each other online and how to do the presentation, whether I still do it live virtually or whether they can pre-record it. But I think if you're writing exams, you probably could still write an exam, but really think about what if I have to switch online? What's going to happen with that? And of course, connect it to all the material you've already done. So you can see here for my topic, it ends with an essay, which actually probably won't be about rail privatization at all. It'll probably be about privatization in another sector. So making them apply what they've learned to a different context. And the final principle, which we're going to think about, is that you need to communicate with your students often and I guess short, snappy communications as regularly as you think is appropriate. And this for me is the bit where you make sure that they see you as a human rather than a bot. So I'm planning on making a weekly announcement through the announcements tab form on Moodle up here, the news form, just reminding them of what we've done, what they're expected to do the next week. They'll also have a planner of what's going to happen all term. I will engage with this Q&A discussion forum, so I'll make sure I engage with that regularly. Hopefully, like I said, I will be able to have multiple short live sessions with them. I should say on this course, I run the tutorials as well as the lecture, so I am the only teacher that they see. I expect to have more office hours, so I'll probably do 2 lots of office hours at different times to meet people in different time zones. And it is really important, I think, that they remember this module as being taught by a human being, not an online course. It's an area that I'm particularly passionate about, and I really want to make sure that they get that passion. In the past, students have gone on to work and regulators have been taking this course, and I hope that that continues to happen. So I'm just going to close Safari and screen share our survey results. So as I said earlier, I found this reasonably time consuming, but I've actually begun to see the real opportunities of teaching in an adaptable way. For me, the biggest thing is really forcing myself to use lectures as an opportunity for discussion, bringing in current real world examples much more into the materials, and opening up opportunities to make assessments closer to what it's like when you're at work. Having said that, I do fluctuate between frustration, panic, and excitement all the time. I'm sure everyone's the same. You can see here from our survey results when we asked people how they were feeling about moving online, 82% did see it as an opportunity. They were hoping there would be innovation and it would be retained for the long term. But 9% did think it was a frustrating chore. I checked quickly whether there was a difference between the teaching track and the teaching and research track. And the differences aren't big. Actually, the teaching and research track are maybe slightly more on the opportunity, less on the frustration, which is nice. But one of the things that I really wanted to highlight was in this other category, there's some really important points coming out. So a lot of the other was a mix of the two. So sometimes it's an opportunity and it's difficult. But there was a number of things highlighted that I think everybody should be thinking about. One was the need for institutional support. So people can't make these changes on their own, and that institutions need to recognize that this is not a costless exercise. In fact, quite the opposite. Some concern about management interference, which I guess about being told what to do with your institution rather than being able to think about what's appropriate for your course. And the final ones, which are really very important, are thinking about the impact of this change on student mental health, but also on staff health. So staff mental health, but also physical health, given the heavy burden that we're all going to face.